Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to begin our second day looking at Unit 1.1 East Asia with a focus today on economics. Our learning objective is to explain the effects of innovation on the Chinese economy over time. So yesterday, your activity was to read through this document, identify a claim that is being made by the author of the document. So you would write down the one sentence claim or thesis or main idea, or not main idea, but the assertion being made from the author. The second thing you would do is there any supporting evidence inside this document that supports the claim that you identified? And then the last thing was come up with some outside evidence that could be used to support the claim that you identified. All right, so a lot of you have sent me emails with this already, so you've already kind of done this part. But if you didn't do yesterday's activity, you're going to want to do that first, okay? But if you already submit this to me, then you can just kind of watch, and we're going to go over the responses for this, all right? So this is just kind of a warm-up activity for what's going to be done next. So I would highly encourage you to do this if you haven't already, all right? So identify the claim, evidence in this passage that supports that claim, and then outside evidence, either from your homework from last night or from notes from last week. All right, so hopefully you correctly identified this as the main idea, or not, I keep saying main idea, but as the claim, right, or the assertion that is being made by the author. So the nomads had an essential but largely unacknowledged role in this cultural traffic. So hopefully you are able to identify that as the claim being made by the author. And I highlighted a couple of things that could be, that could be identified as evidence supporting. So I'm going to click on that now. All right, so if you correctly identified something like creation of numerous opportunities for cross-cultural contact, comparison, exchange, that would have been good. Or scientific and cultural transfers, or pastoral nomads were the chief innovators, promoters, agents, then that would have been a good identification from this passage of supporting evidence of this initial claim made by the author. And as far as the outside evidence, either from your homework from last night or the night before, or from notes from class last week, maybe you identified something like the spread of stirrups, something we deal with in class, we talked about in class today. Gunpowder was from your homework from last night. Horses coming off from that Central Asian steppe from the pastoral nomadic people into the Song-dynasty, right? And of course, last week we looked at the diffusion of Mahayana Buddhism into China, Islam, right? So Islam has communities in Huangzhou. And I did have one student today in my 1A talk about Manichaeanism, right? So Manichaean Christianity being present during the Tang era of China. So those would have all been good responses. All right. So now that you've done that, right, we're going to just kind of use this passage as a kind of starter, right, for an SAQ. So if you're at home watching this, in class today, students wrote a 2 to 3 sentence response to this question. So if you're at home, you can type this up and email it to me. You can write it on a piece of paper like you would in class, and then take a picture of it in email, or you can just submit it when you return back if the email thing is not something that is easy for you. All right. So the question is, identify one specific historical example of a cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads that occurred in the period before 1450, and you're not allowed to say silk. Okay. So just a couple little basics about SAQs. You have to use complete sentences. All right. So no bulleting and sentence fragments. In order for it to be graded, it has to be a complete sentence. The second thing is you got to be as specific as you can. If the possibility of being wrong is not there, then it can never be right. All right. So you can't just like rephrase the question. That's not gonna earn you any credit at all. Right? So you have to drop some kind of fact. All right. I'm going to skip this one here because we're not doing an explain. We're doing an identify question here. So when you're asked to identify, you can be pretty direct with your response, right? You must answer the question being asked, right? So answer the question being asked with a specific example. You can use vocabulary kind of words, academic concepts, proper noun kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that if you kind of say that phrase or that word to a student who's not taking AP World History, they probably wouldn't know what the word meant. All right, one of those kinds of words. All right? So, and the whole thing can be done in 2 sentences, 3 sentences max. All right. So once again, you're going to identify one specific historical example of a cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads that occurred in the period before 1450. And you're welcome to use any notes, class notes, homework notes, whatever notes that you want to answer this question. And please submit this in. All right, so once we finished that in class, we, and that took about 10, 15 minutes to kind of get through that. We then took a minute and kind of looked at the Qingming scroll. So this is a very long scroll that I have hanging out in the hallway. So when kids were done writing their SAQs, they kind of filtered their way outside and looked at this scroll. And we're going to have a look at this scroll real quick. And I'm gonna pop a link up on Google Classroom as well. But what I want you looking for is the evidence of Taoism, Confucianism, right? So economic activity, you can see there, technological achievements, right? Kind of architectural, any examples of different social hierarchies that exist in that image. All right, so the image is, the link will take you to here, and this is from the University of Columbia website, and they got a little description of what it is, and then you can actually click in and see an interactive version of the scroll that you can zoom in on and really have a look around. Okay, so if you wanna go to Google Classroom and just kind of look at that before I go over it real quick, then you're welcome to do so, or you're welcome to do so afterwards. All right, so real briefly, so this scroll, right, like any scroll, is designed to be looked at in a particular way. So we don't really look at scrolls that much anymore because we have books, but scrolls are designed to be looked at on a table, generally speaking, and it's meant to be like unraveled with one hand and re-raveled with another as you kind of look at it. In this case here, this is designed to be looked starting on this kind of right side and then viewed to the left, right? So kind of like this, all right? Right, so we notice here, right, and you're being asked to kind of look for a couple of things. Remember, Taoism, Confucianism, economic activity, anything from last night's homework, those technological achievements, right, social hierarchies, architecture, etc. All right, so obviously this begins with it's very Taoist, right, kind of nature-focused, nature-oriented, very kind of tranquil, harmonious. And as we make our way across, right, we can see a number of people kind of filtering their way in. We see some rice fields up here, right? So kind of people filtering their way into a city, right? So, and this is for a festival, right? So this is the Qingming festival, or at least that is one of the kind of leading thoughts on what this is. So this is a spring festival, really kind of focused around ancestor veneration, filial piety. And, so they come and they clean up the graves and families get together, and it's a big kind of family-oriented celebration. And of course, in the city, it's a big market time, right? So you see people coming in from probably a neighboring community, maybe coming back to their ancestral communities, right? And we can see kind of really early on, just from here, some good examples of social class being portrayed here, right? So, we're seeing a horse, but not just a horse. I mean, horses are going to be seen throughout this, but most of the time they're going to be used for labor purposes or to extract the energy out of the animals. Here, simply, you're seeing somebody ride. So what does that tell you about their class? And of course, this right here, this sedan chair, who is inside here, right? Or a better question is, based on what we talked about yesterday in class, what is the gender of the person inside here? And why are they outside of the house? Like, what kind of things might be going on at a time when families all get together? All right, so we kind of move our way across, and of course, hopefully you can identify what this is, right? Probably not a river, or maybe it is, but it could also very well be something that we had talked about yesterday, created during the Song-dynasty. You're also seeing a number of different examples of something from your homework last night, right? So are these ocean-going vessels or not? They definitely have the stern post rudder that you could say is. All right, and of course, we see as we kind of move towards, and you kind of back this out a little bit, if we move towards this kind of center quadrant, we've gone a long way from the, kind of tranquil nature, harmonious, to, the kind of the bustling center, and if there is a scene of chaos in this image, it is surrounding this boat, right? So what is going on with this boat? And of course, everyone around this boat seems to be kind of drawn to the action that is taking place here, right? So have a look at that and try to make some assertions. What you think? It's also good to kind of look at this bridge, right? Kind of unique architecture here. And of course, this is the center of a lot of commerce. So you can see restaurants, and if you zoom in on this, you can also see merchants here selling their wares. And then once we get by this kind of chaotic setting, things become much more organized and much more calm, right? So a very harmonious and orderly society is now being portrayed as we kind of enter into this kind of second part of this scroll. And here we see the gate, right? So kind of the entrance into the walled part of the city, and you can see kind of continuous, highly orderly, etc. All right, and if you can kind of scroll in here, zoom in, and just see what you're seeing. You're seeing camels, you're seeing mules, you're seeing horses. You're seeing the horse collar, right? You see a horse collar here. All kinds of examples of wheelbarrows, right, being kind of used as wagons. And so it's a really interesting image. I kind of always found this interesting, and it's a really good way to see some of that technology that you read about for your homework last night. Kind of being portrayed in a real life kind of snapshot of what life would have been like during the Song era. Right? So I would highly encourage you to kind of just spend a few minutes just trying to look at what's going on and seeing the types of activities, and see if you can identify some unique things yourself. All right. I'm going to continue with this, and you're welcome to spend more time on that scroll if you'd like. And today in class, we just spent a minute just kind of talking about this kind of last part of it, because a lot of this is just homework from review. Right, so we're seeing this kind of long distance trade on the increase. And of course, with this long distance trade on the increase, we're seeing a shift from kind of Silk Road interior of China over to coastal cities like Guangzhou. So just take a moment and kind of look at Guangzhou and where it is. This is near modern day Singapore. And of course, think about the images that you saw that kind of in that scroll. And of course, some of the technologies that would make being a more outwardly focused kind of trade, ocean-going trade possible. So think about that, and of course, hopefully you're coming up with things like the magnetic compass, the stern post rudder, which you saw in that image. So we're seeing the transition during the Tang era, and this will continue into the Song. And really, about until the 1430s and 40s, during the Ming era, you're going to see this kind of outwardly focused coastal, looking China, okay, when it comes to their trade, all right? And of course, it's also a good reminder from your reading, from your homework, some of the big economic, things that characteristics of the Song era, right? Things that make the Song so, well regarded for its economic accomplishments. Things like first time to use paper currency in history. Of course, coal, and we talked about that in regards to the Grand Canal, being used for not just heating, but also for the kilns, to make steel out of that iron. Gunpowder being weaponized for the first time in history. Movable type, so kind of making that transition from Buddhist texts to Neo-Confucian texts and Confucian texts during the Song era. Of course, with the rise of seagoing economic activity is the rise of merchants and the prominence of merchants within society. And of course, agricultural accomplishments is going to help create an increase in population. So we talked yesterday about champa rice being introduced via the tribute system from what is today Vietnam. And of course, you can see here this population graph, literal doubling of the population of China during this Song period. So it's a real time of stability and economic prosperity and population growth during this time. All right, so feel free to pause this and take a minute and read through, just as a refresher from your homework. All right, and that's about it for today. All right, so I apologize for going through this very quickly, but because of COVID coverages and the such here, my lunch is a little short. All right, so remember, we're talking about China and of course how it is interacting with the outside world. Specifically today, we kind of looked at cultural pastoral nomads and their interaction in diffusion. But just know that China is the regional hegemon, the cultural center of this region. And the tribute system is going to bring stuff into China, such as champa rice, but it's also going to result in the diffusion of things out of China. So, and that's something we're going to focus on in tomorrow's class is Korea, Japan, Vietnam. All right, that is all for today. Sapriyadi.